Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Audit and Memo Manager, and we have our guest presenters. I'm happy to announce from Delta Airlines today. Hi, I'm Judy Howard with ARC. I'm Customer Experience and Operations, and also I have with me from ARC one of my colleagues, Paige Blunt, who is Manager of Industry Relations and Airline Retailing. I'm going to have actually Paige introduce our guest from Delta today, but before I hand it over to Paige, just a few housekeeping. We are going to take questions all throughout the session this afternoon, and to ask those questions, everyone will be muted. Just go to your control panel to the right-hand side of your screen, and where it says questions, just type them in. And we're going to intermittently go through those questions throughout the presentation. Delta's wonderful about if we don't get to answer all the questions this afternoon, what they do is they do a Q&A, we post it on our website, so all of the information that is shared today and also questions that don't get answered, they will put in this document and we'll have those posted. So without further ado, Hope, I'm going to turn it over to you so we can get started.
Hi, everyone. It's Paige Blunt. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think it's going to be a very interactive session. I hope that you find it to be really interesting and helpful for you. As always, I'd like to thank Delta so much for participating with us. We've done this several times now, and the sessions seem to be very valuable to the agents. So I'd like to turn it over now to Tim Delaney at Delta. He's the General Manager of Customer Service and Finance. So we'll let you get started. Thank you so much, Tim, for joining.
Thanks, Paige. As Paige said, my name is Tim Delaney, and in the conference room today with me, I have Hope Harper. Hope is the manager over our global sales audit function here at Delta. Hope has two of her subject matter experts with her here. First, we've got Nina Gardenhire, who's a senior analyst agency audit, as well as Diane Haschel. She is the senior analyst agency audit as well, handling our disputes on the back end. And we have a specialist in the department whose name is Teresa Knowles, and Teresa will talk to us a little bit about some of the back-end collection processing that goes hand in hand with our audit and debit memo process. We started out 4 or 5 years ago with several goals in mind, one of which was to be the premier partner for you folks, our agency sales partners, excuse me, to do business with. Now, to do that, we know we needed to go through and take a complete inventory of everything that we did. How did we do it? Can we do it better? Can we become more efficient? And a lot of these efforts worked side by side with ARC as they began the debit memo working group process in the industry. So with that in mind, we took a look at our complete end-to-end debit memo process, and we want to share with you today some of the things that have transitioned and gone on here over the past 5 years. And so with that, let me go through just a few things that we'll be talking about today. We want to talk a little bit about the passenger transaction flow. We'll talk with you guys about how our systems integrate here within Delta, what we have in terms of data warehousing, our complete ticket enterprise system, which is a homegrown system that we created starting about 15 years ago. So we'll look at the passenger transaction flow. Of course, you guys, I'm sure, are interested in the audit scope. So we're going to look at our full audit scope. We're going to walk through a couple of interesting audit types. We've got some internal audits which don't really apply to you guys because that pertains to our internal FTO and CTOs. But then we've got our agency audit and our vendor audits that come into play with our travel agency sales. We'll look at the revenue recovery system flow. Revenue recovery is our subsystem of what's called revenue pipeline here at Delta, and that's where all the audit and debit memo processing takes place. The vendor audit flow, we'll kind of talk a little bit about how the records get to our vendor, what they do, and then when they send it back to us, the process that we go through before we issue any kind of debit memo. We'll also look at the debit memo inquiries and the dispute process. That's what Diane will talk with us about. And then Teresa on the collections management flow on the back end. So with that, on the passenger transaction flow, we've got two pieces here. We've got the travel agency sales, of course, and we've got our own internal sales. And our internal sales are coming to the revenue pipeline system via electronic ticket records, or if it's external at the ARC and BSP agencies, it's coming to us initially anyway through a TCN file until we have the sale reported to us. On the travel agency sales, we get the sales report data, we'll marry it up against the TCN, and that way we'll officially recognize the agency sale as having occurred. And then, of course, any kind of lift that takes place at our airport operations or at the travel agency, if it involves a refund or exchange, we'll marry that up with the primary sale record as well, and then that will again be housed in our revenue pipeline system. So with that, I'm going to transition on over to Hope, and she's going to delve into our audit scope and discuss some of the things that we look at here, both from a vendor perspective and in our department here in Atlanta at corporate headquarters, and how we process accordingly. Hope?
Thank you, Tim. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks again for joining us for our third webinar. As Tim said, we're going to do a little bit different this year. We're going to tell you a little bit about how our area, our department, actually processes our work. And we do business with, of course, the U.S. agencies that report through ARC and 100 plus VSPs. So we have a very big global audit scope. And some of the examples in our audit scope are listed on the slide 4. I'm not going to touch on every one of them, but mainly, we're looking at published, unpublished. We're looking at auto-priced and manually priced, audit taxes, commissions, refunds, exchanges, fraud and abuse, duplicate usage, unreported sales, those types of things. In our agency audit, we have actually 2 channels where we get potential errors that come into our system. And our first is our internal audits. And these are audits that we perform in-house for our travel agency community. And those would include our duplicate usage type of audit where maybe a transaction's been refunded twice, or it's been flown and refunded, or refunded exchanged. And of course, unreported sales, which has gone down tremendously since electronic ticketing came into the picture. So usually those are related to technical issues, say through the GDS or with the agencies, and those are usually reported to us through ARC, letting us know there's been an issue and to issue debit memos, or they're going to rerun these late, whatever. So, and then of course we have our fraud and abuse.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Oh, I just want to make sure that we didn't have a technical difficulty there. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so is everything okay? I can proceed?
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Okay, all right. The next channel that we get our audit information from is through our audit vendor. And again, they audit 100% of original sales, refunds, exchanges, everything that I have just about listed on the global audit scope. And of course, our Delta policies, which include, name change, schedule change, and IROC information. I'm going to talk a little bit about a system that we use, which was created specifically by our IT team here at Delta, and this is our actual debit memo, credit memo receivable system, and it's called Revenue Recovery System. And as you can see on slide 7, that it shows the 2 channels where we have our internal audits and our vendor audits. It flows in, and these are actually entered into our system as proposed memos. They haven't been issued yet. And then what happens is the team here, like Nina, will go in and validate the error to make sure that it's being correctly seen as an error. Sorry. If there's anything that needs to be modified before it's issued, then it's corrected. And so my audit team here who validates everything will then either issue the memo or they'll deny it. Once it's been issued, the system will set up the receivable accounting entries. Once it's paid, I'm sorry, I've got a scratchy throat. Once it's paid, the receivable is then mapped to the correct account. If it's disputed and then the dispute's rejected and it's paid, then of course that accounting takes place as well. If it's closed, all the accounting's reversed. I'm sorry, I'm trying to catch a cold. But anyway, if you'll move to page 8, we have our vendor audit flow. And again, you'll see where our vendor audits 100% of ARC and also BSP transactions. The vendor sends files to Delta with proposed memos. These files are loaded into our revenue recovery system. And again, our revenue recovery team will validate memos proposed by the vendor, and they'll either determine whether to issue the memo, to modify and issue the memo, or to deny the memo. And then at night, there's 2 things that happen. The first is that a file is sent back to our audit vendor that lets them know what we did with that proposed memo so they can update their system. And then a memo file is created and uploaded automatically to ARC Memo Manager. So anything that we issue, say on Monday, will be in Memo Manager on Tuesday. And that covers our actual audit flows and audit scope. So now I'm going to transition over to Nina. She's going to give you a little bit more detail about the vendor audit and the Delta validation.
Okay, thank you, Hope, and hello, everyone. I will begin with the steps that are followed to try and make the audit as accurate as possible. So as the vendor is auditing, any auto price tickets that are found with fare, tax, or fare rule discrepancies are sent to the Delta team to research with our pricing support team. And they research with the appropriate areas, which include ATPCO and the GDSs. And by determining the origin of the error, this ensures that the debit memo is issued to the correct entity, either the travel agency or the GDS, or it could be determined that no debit memo is issued at all. The vendor is also checking for similar ticketing errors. This would be within an agency, a single agency individually, or if they see a pattern across multiple agencies. The vendor will send a list of tickets and will research to determine if there are any internal issues or any information that may have caused the ticketing discrepancy. Typically, it's 10 or more tickets that alerts the vendor to check ahead, but it could be less. It could be, 1 ticket depending on the situation. And an example of less than 10 would be a single ticket that would result in a high dollar amount. And also, we're communicating daily with the vendor, and this is through email. We also hold bi-weekly conference calls addressing questions and any issues that cannot be handled by email. Okay, so once the vendor has proposed the memos to the Delta team, they're uploading into our system, and the Delta team will perform quality control checks and make any needed changes or corrections or catch any memos that should not be issued. We make sure when possible to share contract and contract revisions, and we try to do this in advance to ensure that the vendor is clear on application, and we can pass along any helpful feedback to the sales team for clarification or enhancements to the programs before they're distributed. The Delta team establishes relationships with all areas that affect how the ticket will be issued. For example, sales support, sales, pricing, revenue integrity. This helps to minimize discrepancies with contracts, fair filing, policy, and provide our audit perspective to those areas and understand more how they impact the quality of issuing a ticket. So now I'll move on to the best practices that Delta adheres to. We're following the ARC best practice for our audit. The #1 best practice is Delta does not allow the vendor to issue debit memos. They propose these errors to the Delta team for review and validation. We work closely with all internal areas. so they are aware of how their decisions impact ticketing transactions. We provide ongoing training to the vendor, as well as making sure that the internal audit teams stay up to date with all policies and procedures. And of course, all audit price discrepancies are researched directly with the pricing teams prior to any debit memos being issued. And Delta has worked to ensure that our policies and procedures are easy to access using Delta Pro, and you can locate them using the link that we've provided. So now some helpful hints. After giving that overlook, you just want to give some helpful hints. We've covered some of these before in previous webinars, but once again, Delta Pro, if you're not sure what Delta's policy is for issuing, exchanging, or refunding a ticket, please go to our Delta Pro system. The Delta Pro has a search engine that is very helpful to quickly locate any topic that you need. The next would be make sure all required designators, program numbers, and waiver codes are visible on the ticket. Verify the itinerary is booked in the correct class of service. Incorrect booking class is one of the top things that we see, infractions that we see. And we find that it's primarily due to advanced schedule changes. We understand how important it is for travel agents to reaccommodate their passengers. However, if you are not able to rebook in the required class of service, please contact Delta for assistance. And prior to exchanging the ticket and on any subsequent exchanges, verify the issue dates and travel dates. Travel dates are a big one, are still within the validity period. When exchanging or refunding a ticket, always check the fare rule. Fares that in the past allowed changes or refunds or did not have a fee for changes and refunds now have restrictions. And some fares no longer allow any changes or refunds at all. So it's important to look through all of the fare rules. And lastly, for any exceptions or questions regarding tickets issued on Delta Airlines, please contact Delta Sales Support or Delta Reservations for assistance. So this completes at a high level the steps that we take to audit and validate the debit memos. I will now turn it over to Diane.
Thank you, Nina. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Diane Hashley, and I'm a member of the correspondence team. On this next slide, I will be reviewing the next steps in the process. This is the review of debit memos and inquiries. So every day in our Memo Manager, a member of our team downloads a report of debit memos that are being disputed. The status of these memos are in dispute pending status. This report also includes debit memo inquiries, and inquiries are really identified when an agency's notes state they are researching with an outside source, such as with a sales rep or with their GDS. So for each dispute or inquiry, the comments are reviewed, as well as any support that's attached to determine if it's a true dispute or an inquiry. They are then assigned to the applicable auditor and are uploaded into our revenue recovery system for tracking purposes. And all disputes and inquiries are worked in date order, and this ensures that none are missed or overlooked. So then what happens next is the auditors will begin researching each dispute and inquiry using Delta's internal resource tools. When the research has been completed, the auditor will update our Memo Manager by either accepting or rejecting the dispute and adding a thorough response. And if applicable, if needed, we will upload any documents as support, or if your agency requests any support, we will also attach that as well. Now, if the dispute is rejected and the memo is valid, the status converts back to Agent Action Require, which is now considered complete and available for payment. However, if the dispute is accepted, then the memo is now considered closed and the status changes back to close, changes to closed by carrier. Now, on this next slide, I will be reviewing best practices. Delta adheres to the following ARC dispute management best practices. First, memos are issued to the travel agency that issued the ticket and are distributed electronically via our Memo Manager. Our preferred method for communication, viewing, corresponding, disputing, and processing payments for debit memos is through ARC Memo Manager. Now keep in mind that Delta only permits agencies to dispute a memo up to 3 times. And if it exceeds 3 times, you can always send an email to our collection mailbox, and I'll go over that in a little bit. And we do have an automation in place to identify multiple disputes on a debit memo, and then these are escalated for review and then final resolution. And then each time a memo is touched, whether it's for review, if it's an inquiry or a dispute, both ARC Memo Manager and our revenue recovery system is fully documented at all points of the memo life cycle. Okay, so at this time what I'd like to share with you is a couple of best practices statistics with everyone. Best practices states that 30 days is the turnaround time to respond to a dispute. However, Delta commits to a turnaround time to be within 10 business days. Every day we monitor the daily process flow of correspondence to meet our departmental goals. And our average turnaround time today is 1 to 3 business days. Now, on occasion, a dispute may take a little longer if we are researching with another department. Now, best practices states that credit memos are to be issued within 14 calendar days. However, today we are processing them within 5 business days. And for payments, best practices states payments should be applied within 14 days, and currently payments are applied within 5 business days. And last but not least, if we do make an adjustment to a memo amount, best practices states that we need to make the adjustment within 2 business days. However, currently, whenever we make an adjustment to a memo, it's done at the same time that we answer the dispute. Now, in this next slide, here are some helpful hints what your agency can do to help us. So when disputing a memo, provide a detailed reason for your dispute. If your agency's dispute comments are not clear as to why you're disputing, we can only provide the reason the memo was issued. And then when disputing a memo for the first time, please attach all supporting documentation to the dispute for review and consideration. By doing so, this will prevent multiple disputes from occurring. Another reminder, and this happens quite frequently, is when disputing a memo, remember to click on the dispute button to submit your dispute. By doing this, this action places the memo in dispute pending status, and our collection department is notified. Now, we have recommended to ARC to add an enhancement or some type of an alert to remind agencies to select the dispute button when comments have been entered so your dispute is not missed or overlooked. So keep in mind whenever you add comments and you are disputing, just to reassure by confirming that the status has been changed to dispute pending. Now, this next statement is very, very important, as Delta does not accept a copy and paste portion of a contract as support. So whenever you're attaching a contract, make sure it's a complete contract for us to review. And by doing so, this ensures our agencies that your agency was using the correct contract at the time of ticketing. Another important note is, if at all possible, do not dispute in multiple avenues, such as disputing in a ARC Memo Manager, and then by sending an email and or by contacting your sales rep, as all of those dispute requests comes to us for handling. Now, we have included the Delta Collections mailbox here listed. The email address is collections.delta@delta.com, and this can be found at the bottom of each memo. Now, this email address should only be utilized if your agency has exceeded disputing a memo 3 times, or if your debit memo has been closed in ARC Memo Manager. This concludes the debit memo dispute and inquiry flow. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Teresa, and she will go over the collections management process.
Thank you, Diane. Hello, everyone. My name is Teresa Knowles, and I work in Delta's Debit Memo Collections team. I will be giving an overview of the collections management flow, acceptable forms of payment, and helpful hints. So on this slide, you will see the life of a debit memo from the date of issuance until the date of closure. After a debit memo is issued, there may be one or more types of communication sent to an agency. On the first day of the month following the issuance of a debit memo, an open memo notice is sent. When you receive this notice, Delta expects your agency to review the memo and either dispute the memo or submit payment prior to the memo reaching 60 days of age. If a memo is not resolved prior to reaching 60 days of age, then a collections letter is sent. At this point, Delta expects your agency to review and either dispute the memo or submit payment prior to the payment due date. If the memo has been disputed and Delta has proven the memo is valid, Delta does expect agencies to submit payment. If a memo has never been disputed and the memo has reached 90 days of age, Delta will contact you by phone and trying to resolve the memo. So on this next slide, I will go into the collections process in a little more detail. As you know, Delta's debit memo policy states debit memos are due upon receipt and payment should be processed in your next available sales report. It is our goal to monitor activity in the revenue recovery system to minimize the age of the outstanding items and to ensure the timely recovery of these items to prevent memos from becoming aged. So on the first day of each month, Delta downloads a report showing a list of all open debit memos. If your agency has an open memo, your agency will receive some type of monthly communication. And our monthly communication is in the following order. On the first day of the month, an open memo notice is sent to all agencies with a list of open memos 0 to 59 days of age. Upon the receipt of this notice, Delta expects your agency to review the list of debit memos and either dispute the memo in detail, providing a complete supporting document, or submit payment prior to the memo reaching 60 days of age. If a memo is not resolved prior to reaching 60 days of age, then a collection letter is sent by email with a list of all open memos 60 days and older. At this point, Delta expects your agency to review and make all attempts to resolve the memos prior to the payment due date. If the memo has now reached 90 days of age, Delta will reach out to you by phone in an effort to discuss and resolve the memo. At this point, if Delta has never received a written dispute, the memo is past the point to dispute. If the memo has been disputed and Delta has proved the memo is valid, Delta does expect agencies to submit payment to avoid any further escalation. If your agency has memos under 60 days and memos equal or over 60 days, 2 separate emails are sent. Your agency will receive 1, an email for open memo notices, and 2, an email for collections with a payment due date. Another important note is that Delta receives a weekly master file from ARC which updates our internal records with each agency's physical mailing address, telephone number, and email address. It is important that your agency's contact information is updated with ARC to ensure that we have the correct lines of communication. So on this next slide,
hey, Teresa, this is Paige.
Yes.
There's a question that came in about the collections effort. Is there a place in Memo Manager that indicates that their memo is in collections or not?
No, there is not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So on this next slide, we're going to go over the acceptable forms of payment, and our preferred method, of course, is through ARC Memo Manager. We currently still accept an agency check, which must be mailed to the revenue recovery address that you see here. However, very few agencies use this method. And then we also accept a wire transfer, which Delta's wire transfer instructions are shown here. If you choose this method, the bank does charge the agency a wire transfer fee in addition to the amount of the debit memo. And the transfer fee is depending on the country. For the United States, the fee is typically anywhere between $50 to $100. It is important to note that Delta does not accept credit cards or MCOs as a form of payment for debit memos. So on this next slide, we have some helpful hints. So what can your agency do to help us? So one is to take immediate action and resolve memos in a timely manner. This includes debit and credit memos. 2, be sure to respond with the action your agency will take when receiving an email. 3, communicate with ARC suggestions to improve ARC Memo Manager. And 4, be sure your agency's contact information is up to date with ARC. And number 5, keep informed about Delta's policies and procedures by visiting Delta Pro. So now on this next slide, we have provided a quick reference guide of important contacts and web links for your convenience. So go through those and look through them and see if there's anything, if you have any questions, feel free to let us know. And this now completes the Audit and Debit Memo Manager webinar, and I'm now turning this back over to Tim.
Thank you, Teresa. Paige, Judy, do you guys have any questions that we can entertain?
We do. First question, excuse me, how often are your audit vendors trained? Do you have kind of a schedule or some recurrent training? How does that work?
Actually, they have a team that does the training. Of course, we provide them with audit guidelines, which are updated, and anytime there's a change in procedures, that they have a trainer on site of their own so it's more like we train the trainer, and any updates goes through that trainer. And then they have a process too where, you know, their team that does the audit, their results goes through a QC process with the vendor prior to them proposing those potential errors to Delta. So it goes through like 3 checks before a memo is actually issued or not issued.
That's a really good question. I know anytime that we talk about, you know, a third-party outsourced vendor doing any type of work like this, that gives, you know, some of us reason for concern. We're actually in a pretty unique situation. We've been working with our particular vendor now for what, a good 15 plus years, huh?
About 15, yeah.
And I myself, down through the years, have worked with third-party vendors, gosh, for the past 30 years. This is actually the best relationship that I have worked with, and one of the ways to, you know, assess how good that they're doing, and particularly when it comes to headcount, is looking at their headcount turnover. And for a third-party vendor, their headcount turnover is very small, and I would venture to say, gosh, one of the lowest that I have seen when it comes to, you know, a third-party outsourced vendor. Now, of course, factors come into play there, you know, region of the world where they're working, what type of jobs are available in these particular areas. But where our vendor is located, there are actually some travel schools and education that they avail themselves to. So when they come into our operation to begin working on our audit, they're not coming in blindfolded. They know what they're getting into. They know, you know, they're familiar with the travel rhythm with fares and with tariffs and so forth. So I think that goes a long way in terms of keeping the turnover small as far as our operation goes.
And a lot have travel agency experience, so it's not like they have no airline experience or airline travel experience.
So, Hope, speak a little bit to the communication we have with them. How often each week? Oh,
yeah. Well, you know, we can communicate on a daily basis via email. Either them asking a question, if something seems to be gray, they'll reach out to us to ask about something. And of course, if we have to go to our sales people, our pricing people, we try to do all our research up front on any audit questions. Then, on the other hand, if we have changes in programs or whatever, you know, we're communicating that information as well on a daily basis. And then, I mean, like Tim said, our relationship is 15 plus years with the vendor, And so it's not uncommon for us to pick up the phone and just call them and say, hey, you know, we've got this situation. I need to let you know this up front, so you know, don't include this in the audit, and you know, whatever the situation may be, and vice versa. They, you know, it's not uncommon for me to get a phone call a couple of times a week with, you know, any type of situation. So we do have a very close and very good working relationship with the vendor. They are very good about make change on the fly, you know, on any minute. So, like, you know, if we have sales reach out and say, hey, you know, we forgot to update this program, and we want to make sure no debit memos get issued. So we can we call the vendor or email the vendor saying, you know, don't issue memos for this particular situation. So they're very flexible. And then, of course, we have bi-weekly conference calls with them to talk about any outstanding questions that we have not been able to provide an answer yet, that type of thing.
Thank you, Hope. That's a great inclusive answer. We really appreciate all of that insight. A lot of kind of questions have come up about the vendor since we started talking about it. One, why do you use an audit vendor instead of auditing internal?
Well, we just don't have the staffing. It's more economical to work with the vendor. They have really done a terrific job. I mean, we've tried different techniques in auditing over the years, you know, and this just seems to work the best for us.
I think the bottom line on that question, Paige, is it's one of economics. And I'm sure all of our industry partners or travel agency partners can appreciate this from an economic standpoint, headcount, cost perspective. It's just more economically feasible to send this offshore and have somebody, at least in our case anyway, take a first stab at this. And I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we do not let them, and we touched on this, but we don't let them press the button to issue a debit memo. I mean, that comes back in here, and we've done benchmarks, and periodically we'll do benchmarks with our industry partners, with our airline competitors, both domestic and international, and we keep a staff and number that's a little bit higher than our competitors to do just this, and that's to watch after and do QC on the vendor who is proposing debit memos to us. We bounce that up against numerous SLAs that we look at on a weekly and monthly basis, and one of the stats that just jumps out when you talk about the debit memo space is that we have an accuracy rate that fluctuates just above and below 99%. So basically what that means is 99% of every debit memo that goes out the door is a valid, accurate debit memo. And that's one of the reasons we keep our dispute numbers so low on the back end. And when disputes do come in, we're able to turn them much more quickly than most of our competitors because we just don't have that many. So I hope that helps provide.
Oh, it does, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, another question about that kind of same thing. So if a memo comes in as a proposed memo, or they're sending you something and said, hey, look at this, can you send it out the door? If you decide not to send it out the door for some reason, what about the retraining of the auditor at that time? Or how do they handle that?
Okay.
Great question.
Like I said, we don't allow them to issue the memo. That comes to us, right. And we either issue it, deny it, or if it's a valid memo, it just needs some modifications, we'll make the modifications and issue it. But every night when we, at the end of the day, a report is sent back to the audit vendor, and it tells all the memos we issued, all the proposed memos we did not issue that we denied, and it has a reason. So we can state the reason why the memo wasn't issued, and we also follow up on anything we deny. We send them an email with a copy of that memo and the reason why it was not valid, so that they can update their audit team so they don't make this mistake again.
Great. Okay. Perfect. Another question about the vendor. You know, when everybody has a weather delay or an IROP or something happens, how do the auditors get that information about which flights are affected? And then obviously the waivers, you're sending waivers or something to them, and how do they marry all that together so they know whether or not the waiver really goes with the...
They have access, our audit vendor, it's just like our audit team has access to all the bulletins, all the waiver bulletins or any type of event bulletins that have a waiver code. Anytime we get an update or if the waiver code changes, they're getting the same information. And so we all have that. And it's all published out on delta.com. So like I said, the audit vendor's getting the same information.
Okay. All right, great.
Kind of to drill down on that a little bit, Paige, our particular vendor has their own technology staff right there on site. They have a very robust system that they've coded themselves. It's very flexible, and they're able to input all of this information that comes in on the fly to help them with the accuracy when those particular transactions that flow in for audit that have been impacted by IROPS or weather systems or, hurricanes, typhoons, you name it, they'll be extracted out of the audit.
Okay. Terrific. So they're trying to be more proactive on their end to try to be sure that they're as accurate as possible.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely.
Okay. Another question, we're going to switch a little gear. We don't have any more audit vendor questions at the moment. One of the questions is something that comes up quite a bit. We're very familiar with it. Memos that are auto-priced through the GDS, why are those sent to the agency? I can talk to that a little bit, but I'd love to hear Delta specifics.
Okay, no problem. And, well, actually, each carrier has a contract with each GDS provider. And we have 2 GDS providers who allow us to bill them directly for auto price errors, and then we have 2 other major ones who do not want to be billed directly. They want us to debit the agency. I just worked with those 2 in particular and updated procedures. In the past was always, anytime an auto price error has come up, we have gone directly to our fair filing team to make sure it wasn't a Delta filing error before generating a memo. We are also taking that a step further, and we are communicating with the GDS as well. So they can come back and say, yes, this is our fair filing error, issue the memo to the travel agent, and we'll reimburse them. Like I said, it's all based on contractual types of data, but I bet we have not issued 10 auto-priced memos in the past year, and it's very small, and we are doing our due diligence to make sure that we are talking with both the Delta and the GDS fair filing contacts to ensure that we are not issuing a memo unless it's actually valid.
Okay, great, thank you. The next question talks about why does Delta charge both a service fee and a compensatory fee for credit card disputes?
When a credit card is rejected, it is put, the amount of that transaction is put in one field. And then there is a fee, $50 now, that is charged, and this covers all the bank charges, all the work that the process goes through over in the credit card accounting area. So that's why you see that. But like I said, it's not really 2 fees. One amount is the amount of the transaction, and the $50 is the actual fee for handling all of the bank charges and manual processes that take place in the credit card accounting team.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Next question is really, was a question of, has ARC looked into the BSP link model in Canada where memos are automatically billed at 15 days if they're not in dispute? And the answer to that is no. ARC and IATA BSP are very different types of entities. IATA BSP is governed by resolutions, and that is where that ability to automatically draft a travel agent comes from. ARC does not function that way. ARC is not a reporting tool, it's a settlement tool, and the agencies do not have any stipulations for payment time frame on them like in BSP. We do have best practices, and we've outlined those very specifically for payment time frames, dispute time frames regarding both for the airline and for the agency, as well as the GDS. So memos are to be paid in a timely manner based on their either just when they're in dispute. If they come back to be the dispute is denied, then there's a certain time frame for those to be paid. So we're not entertaining any different model other than the model that we have today. We aren't looking at anything like the BSP model. So that's that one. Then there's another question here. When a ticket is issued against a credit card, with a credit card, why does it take 3 days to detect that it's fraud and the debit memo being raised immediately? It sounds as though this person's asking about, I guess the credit card company comes back to the airline and they immediately raise a memo. But I guess it's a question about 3 days.
I don't know where 3 days comes into that. We have to wait. Delta doesn't know that a credit card charge is a fraud until we receive a rejection from the credit card company, and that can take months. So that's why memos aren't issued until we get the rejection. If the agency realizes at the time that they issued a transaction and it's fraud, they need to go directly to the police, file a police report, and then contact us. And that we have on your contact information slide 19, there is a contact for, where is it?
About halfway down.
It's about halfway down. Oh, there, right in the middle, revenue recovery, travel agency, credit card fraud. But we can't, because it's a third-party transaction, Delta cannot do anything until we have a police report. So if you send us a police report, the travel has not been flown, we can go in and suspend those flight coupons so they can't fly. And then we can, at that point, suspend the ticket and the memo does not have to be paid. So, and a lot of, the new fraud today, which Delta is trying to get their arms around, is they'll go to the travel agency, they'll buy a ticket, and then they'll immediately go to the carrier and exchange it. And so both of us are getting hit. You're getting hit with a credit card fraud. We're getting hit with a credit card fraud if there's an ad collect on the exchange. And so Delta has put a policy in place with the frontline people that if they come to Delta to do an exchange, they have to wait 72 hours. And that usually is a big deterrent. So, and then of course they do that exchange, for the internal sales, we use a scoring tool for credit card fraud called Certify. And there's different scenarios that are put in there. Every time there's a credit card fraud, if it's something different, it's put in there and it goes in and tries to go out and look for any of those transactions. So this has been added to that as well. But as you all know, it's a never-ending battle when you deal with fraud. They always find a new way to do something. So we just have to work together and understand that there's certain things that we need to do to process and take care of these types of frauds. And one of those is making sure you get your police report because, like I said, it's a third party Delta could be sued by the passenger if it turns out it wasn't really a fraud. We canceled their reservation and their flight. So we just have to make sure that we're working together as a team and getting what we need and putting a stop to this.
We also, let me throw this out, we also last year started working with both our credit card processors for Amex and the bank cards, where when the disputes first come in, we're paying them more now to go back to the travel agencies, to the sellers, to give them an opportunity to contact the purchaser. And we're not talking, again, I guess in this scenario, like out and out fraud. It's just, we'll call it friendly fraud, for whatever it's worth. I don't like that term, but nonetheless, we allow an opportunity to fix the situation so that it doesn't ultimately end up in a debit memo. And I was looking at some statistics about 3 weeks ago on this, and the last numbers I saw reflected that we have prevented just under 10,000 debit memos from being issued since last November. From this new process, which we consider it a big win, but we also want those numbers to grow when it comes to credit card rejections.
So if you get one of these emails, they're giving you so many days for you to go back to 7 days to go back to the passenger and get documentation that they actually flew, or it's truly not a fraud, so that a debit memo is not issued, and so that it gets reversed back at the bank. That charge is then reversed back to pay Delta.
Right, and that time frame is very critical because that's as long as the bank gives you, right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you. That was a great, fulsome answer. Lots of information there. I appreciate that. One clarification about the contract. Is there a possibility to send just the page of the contract that holds the needed information, or do they have to send the entire contract? They definitely got the point of not to take a screenshot of it. Yeah. But the question is, could they just send the page?
We're asking you to attach the complete contract. As a lot of you agents know, there's numerous revisions or amendments. So we need to see the actual program you were ticketing against at that time to make sure that you have the most up-to-date program, and so that we're all looking at the same thing.
Okay. Okay.
So we need to see dates. We need to see that that first page gives revisions. All of that information is there.
Okay. Great. Okay, another question. This is going to revert a little bit back to the vendor. How do they know about the flight delays? You mentioned that they have a great database that really includes all of your waivers and all the information about the waivers and what they pertain to, but how do they know about the flight delay? Do you send them the information?
Yes. You wouldn't believe the ton of information we send them on a monthly basis.
Okay.
Yes, so they get all canceled and delayed flight information. If they are unsure about anything, they reach back out to us. Like I said, if there's anything gray that they're not sure about, they will contact us.
And you're using, to verify whether a flight is flown, say the flight is potentially canceled, how are you all verifying, or the vendor, that the flight actually went or truly was canceled?
We have operations information that tells us this, whether the flight operated or not.
Actually, back to our team here in Atlanta, Flight Statistics Group, and they house all of that information. That is real-time information, so we get that information daily. And to Hope's point, we make sure that our vendor also gets that information. It's in all of our best interests to get that information in as quickly as possible. Of course, we've got plenty of time to do that because it's not like they're auditing tomorrow what happened today. So we make sure that they have everything that they need to produce as accurate an audit as possible. Because, I mean, face it, whether we're issuing and handling a debit memo or our agency partners are doing that, that's expensive. And we don't want to, I mean, we don't look at debit memos as a revenue generating department. Matter of fact, we would love it if we never had to issue any. So, you know, we do everything that we can on our end to make sure that the audit is as accurate as possible. And one of the ways we do that, again, is make sure they have up-to-date, timely, and current information so that they're not sending us proposed debit memos only for us to go through and, you know, axe a bunch of them.
You know, we're a small group. We don't have time to go through tons and tons of proposed memos, so we want them to be able to be as accurate as possible so that we can spend our time doing other types of customer service work for better use.
Okay. Do you all host a table of fees that are related to debit memos anywhere, or?
Yes, it's posted out on the Delta Pro in the actual library. You'll see the debit memo policy, and you'll see a fee chart.
Okay. Out on the debit memo policy, the fee chart. Well, that's great. Well, and just so that everyone just kind of remember, we're going to be placing all of this information out on our website once Delta has a chance to answer it in writing. So if you missed a comment or something, you'll be able to definitely see it a little later down the road. It'll take them a little while to make that happen now. Okay, 3 more minutes. A couple more questions. Let's see. Are 100% of Delta tickets audited, or is there just a random sample of Delta tickets audited?
It's 100%.
Okay.
Well, wait a minute. Paige?
Yes.
What was the question again?
Talking about.
Are there 100% of Delta tickets audited, or is it just a random sample?
And for travel agency, 100%.
Well, it's 100%, but let's drill down on that a little bit, because if it's auto priced, I mean, that will be audited, but it's not going to, the audit price are not going to receive the focus that the manually priced transactions are. So yes, we audit 100%, but we focus in on the PNRs and the ticket transactions that took the manual path much more closely.
Yeah, and with the auto price, the audit vendor has a lot of automation in place. They get all the fare information loaded to their system, and it runs through their system. So anything that's auto priced, it's checked against that fare, and anything that's suspect pops up, and they will look at it.
Okay, terrific. And also, do you have a minimum dollar amount that you issue memos for, or no? Is it just the value of the memo is going out the door?
No, we don't have a minimum. You know, with tax, we have to get every penny.
Right.
You know, we're getting ready to be audited as we speak for a U.S. tax. So, you know, it's very important that with taxes we make sure we get the last penny, because they will extrapolate anything we didn't. And
yeah, and that's the key word there, the extrapolate. I mean, we don't want that to come across as we sound greedy, but we all need to understand that when the outside entities come in and audit us, particularly on the taxes, and frankly, that's what they're here for. We've got one that starts Monday morning. If they find a cell where we didn't collect taxes or we didn't accurately correct taxes, that's in a sample, but that sample gets rolled up to 100% of the populations, and we're carrying 200 million passengers a year. It's not uncommon for an error in a tax audit to end up costing the company several $1 million, sometimes over $10 million once that extrapolation occurs. And that's why we take so seriously the audit in terms of taxes, and are our sellers, both not only at the agency locations, but our own ticket agents that are FTOs and CTOs, are they accurately selling the product for what they're supposed to? Because if not, then we're not remitting as far as taxes go. the taxes that we're supposed to, and if we get flagged in an audit, we're looking at some pretty huge fines.
We don't want to have you get that, that's for sure. Whew. Okay, well, we have some other questions, but we're really out of time, so I'm going to let Judy do a wrap-up. Don't forget, we will be including all of the questions in Delta's Q&A.
And Paige, real quick,
Yes.
if the agency community is interested in another webinar next year, we would definitely like to hear some feedback on what they would like us to do.
Like what kind of topics they would like to hear about?
That's correct.
Perfect, okay.
Yeah, great. And thank you for that, Hope. And then Paige, of course, thanks for helping us out on the ARC side. And I really want to thank all of our friends at Delta for being on the phone this afternoon. Tim, Hope, Nina, Teresa, Wendy, Diane, that really spent a lot of time and a lot of hard work putting this webinar together for all of you that attended today. So we're really happy. Hope you found this time valuable. I'm going to be real quick. As Paige did say, I'll just reiterate. These will all be on our website. They'll be under our training section. I'll send out an email, and the recorded webinar will be under training as well. When you hover over that tab, it's webinars on demand. All of our webinars are there. This will be here as well, and along with these Q&As, which will be in our Knowledge Center. We do have our Fraud Awareness Month kicking off in September. The first agent webinar in that series will start on September 12th, and we'll have about 6 of those offered in September. We will also have ones for our airline customers as well, but check those out. And of course, our ARC Travel Connect comes up on October 3rd and 4th. But a great, really warm thank you for all of you attending on the webinar this afternoon, for all of our customers, and of course our friends at Delta and Paige. Thank you very much. Hope to see you next time, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.